see, to listen. So use your faculty of listening more than seeing. Listen. Listen rather than seeing more. Listen more. So my final point is this. If Jesus is going to be a substitute to take in voluntarily the punishment of everyone else on his behalf willingly, if we were to reject your God, our punishment will be eternal burning in hellfire. Someone to substitute my punishment on their shoulder has to take in the same punishment. So if Jesus was going to be a volunteer, he has to eternally burn on hellfire to take my punishment away, right? To be my substitute. Obviously he hasn't done that. So he failed even on that regard. Would you like to explain how this is possible? I've explained already. I've already explained to you. Have you forgotten already? Were you not listening? Okay, what have you so far understood about my first point?
So your first point, I think it says, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the fact that you're saying that Jesus was not sacrificed because it was injured.
Yes.
I want you to tell me where you think the sacrifice started. Because I remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, having been injured then, and the Garden of Gethsemane was the point where you made the decision, not your will, but my will. So I think that's fine. Your second point was what?
No, because when you take someone to the altar, you have to have a perfect sin offering, not injured, not maimed, and so on. If Jesus is going to, if Jesus, what do you consider the altar as? You have the bigger problem because you have no altar, no sacrifice.
So in the Bible it talks about that you lay your life down as a living sacrifice. That's exactly what Jesus did. He asked the Father,
was he perfect?
Take this cup away from me. And he said, not my will but yours. So at that moment he decided.
So he was on the cross, right? But he wasn't dead there, was he?
I was very quiet when you said it.
I'm just clarifying. Because when you say someone is offered as a sacrifice, that means life is taken at that point. In the Garden of Gethsemane, life is not taken away from him. He was on the cross, according to your belief. So, the altar was the cross. Was he injured when he was on the cross?
I don't know why you said the altar was the cross. What's your why you said the
Okay.
cross?
How did they sacrifice in the Old Testament times?
An altar was a very special place. God told them to gave specific measurements for, and we know it's called an altar. Can you show me anywhere where the cross is called the altar?
No, this is what you affirm,
No, I don't
not me.
affirm.
Okay,
I affirm excuse me, can I finish? I affirm
you asked me and then you are...
Fine. I affirm the Bible. Show me anywhere it says the cross is the altar.
No, I'm not saying cross is the altar. I'm saying you have no altar.
So if the cross is not the altar, what I say at the beginning stands.
What do you say?
Said, not my will but yours.
But he wasn't dead there. Where was he dying? Where was he giving his life?
Where are you getting your standard of this is the sacrifice?
Because you said...
Let me finish.
Okay. I will clarify.
This is where the suffering must start.
I will clarify. I will clarify. When you brought the issues of sacrifice and sacrificial system in the Old Testament times, they used to take this animal to the altar to be sacrificed. A perfect sacrifice is something that is not injured. This is the Old Testament law. If Jesus was going to be fulfilling some kind of sacrificial system in line with the Old Testament system, then he has to be perfect and he needs to be sacrificed on an altar. So you had no altar and you had no perfect sacrifice. You affirm that he was a sacrifice. In what kind of sacrifice? According to the Old Testament. Don't you believe according to the Old Testament?
You do have to let me speak because I was very quiet when you spoke. I've asked you, where does it say the cross is the altar?
I didn't say the cross is the altar. You have no altar.
Again, I will say the decision to be sacrificed was made in the Garden of Gethsemane before all the suffering. So your point one is not valid. Remind me of your point two.
Okay, the point one you misunderstood. I'm not talking about when the decision was taken. I'm talking where did the sacrifice take place? Sacrifice means what? Not the decision.
You just don't want to accept my answer.
Wait. Okay, no. Are you saying the decision for him to die took place in the Garden of Gethsemane and not before he was sent to this earth?
Yeah, he made that decision way before, but then he very, very clearly, he prayed again, and he said, Lord, if it be possible, take this cup away from me.
Why is he praying when he was supposed to sacrifice?
Nevertheless...
Another problem. Problem number 5.
You've interrupted me, this is very rude.
I'm just highlighting the problems.
Again, you've interrupted me. nevertheless, not my will but yours.
So-
The issue is you are making a big deal of when was the praise started, and you're saying the cross was an altar.
I'm not saying it.
You're saying.
No, I am not saying.
What you said is.
I have affirmed so many times. I am not saying. This is what you imply.
So tell me what you said, because what you said was.
Okay, let me tell you what.
What you said was he's not a perfect sacrifice because before he got to the cross, he had been whipped, he had suffered. Is that what you said?
Let me clarify. If someone was to be sacrificed according to the Old Testament law, a perfect sacrifice is one that is not maimed or injured. If Jesus is going to be a sacrifice according to that system, then you need to apply those conditions. The conditions are not injured. The conditions are it needs to be sacrificed on an altar. Look. If you believe that he's not a sacrifice according to the Old Testament system, then that's different.
You put some really funny conditions on.
So, how is he a sacrifice? Clarify.
Again, very, very simple. He became a sacrifice. He was a sacrifice for all time anyway, but he was a perfect sacrifice in the Garden of Gethsemane. You are saying that because he was injured before he got to the cross, he's not a perfect sacrifice. I don't see that anywhere in my Bible. You have to bring out a biblical source saying that because he was injured before he got to the cross, which you're saying is an altar, and the Bible never says the cross is an altar, that's not a perfect sacrifice. You're wrong.
You see, what you, of course I'm correct for the following reasons. When the animal has not been brought to the altar, is the animal sacrificed?
No. Again, show me anywhere in the Bible where the cross
Please don't interrupt, it's rude. It's rude to interrupt.
Can you remind him when he does it to me?
No, yeah, I did. You did it, so I said yes.
So, when the animal is still in its, wherever it is, not near the altar, is it sacrificed? No, it's not sacrificed. There may be a decision made which animal they're going to bring to the altar to get sacrificed. So, during the transit to the altar, the animal is not sacrificed. The moment the animal is put on the altar and is sacrificed, at that point you say, sacrifice has happened. If Jesus is on the way, on the transit from heaven to this earth, in your belief, and he is still in heaven, sacrifice hasn't happened. So sacrifice will happen when his life is taken away. So at what point did the life take away? God took it away from him, you believe? When he was on the cross, he said, he gave up his ghost, whatever, right? This is what you believe. So my point is your belief that he is a sacrifice like the Old Testament system of sacrifice? That system. If it is, then he hasn't met those conditions. He cannot be a perfect sacrifice. That was my first point. So go to address my second point.
No, I'll address your first point. You seem to.
But you failed to address it anyway. Address the second point.
Why didn't you stop him from interrupting me?
You two were debating between each other there.
Exactly.
You just sort of
Exactly. Again, Mansur, Jesus said, not my will but yours, before that he was not injured. So the point of sacrifice starts then. What you need to do is you need to show me a biblical reference where the cross is an altar. That's all you need to do. Can you do it?
You see, to answer is this, brother. The conditions were a sacrifice happens on an altar.
Whose conditions?
According to the Old Testament, Jesus had no altar where he was sacrificed, so condition wasn't met. So he failed on two grounds. So my second point, please answer.
I think we've been to time.
Until someone told me.
Number one, the cross is not described as an altar. Number two, can you find me a source where it says you can only sacrifice on an altar?
How did they sacrifice?
No, show me a source.
Hang on, before you ask me a source. No.
What do you mean before? I've already asked.
When you asked me,
okay. Can you back it up?
Yes, sure.
Good.
Now educate us on the sacrificial system according to the Old Testament law.
So you can't back it
Did
up.
they sacrifice willy-nilly anywhere, or did they have a special place where they
So you
sacrificed?
can't sack it.
I am asking you to educate us.
So you can't back it up. You're
Look,
the one who brought the
I am
claim.
simply requesting you to educate us.
What you're trying
What
to do-
was this system of sacrifice?
What you're trying
Did
to-
they sacrifice on an altar or not?
What you're trying to do is move the goalposts. Your initial claim was it's not a perfect sacrifice because by the time it
Do
got
you
to
know
the
how it was
cross-
sacrificed?
You keep interrupting me. It's very rude.
I'm not interrupting, I'm asking for clarification.
By the time it got to the cross, he was not perfect because he'd been injured. Right? All I've said is at the altar, you're saying that the cross is an altar. First of all,
I am not saying that. You keep on lying in front of me. I said every single moment, about 4 times probably now, that I am not saying it's an altar. You keep on saying, oh, you make cross an altar. What a liar in front of my face. Sorry, you can't say that. You can't say that. What I'm asking you, educate us, because we do not know how was the sacrificial system in operation in the Old Testament time. Did they sacrifice a lamb in an altar or not?
So first of all, you asked me 3 points.
Yes.
The first point, now you want to change and ask a 4th question. We're not going to do
No,
that.
no, no, this is not 4th point. The same point.
No, not going to do that.
He was
You
injured.
said-
My first point was he was injured.
First of all, you said it's not a perfect sacrifice. But
Because?
before he got to the cross...
No, because he was injured.
Yeah, before he got to the cross, he was injured. And then you said the conditions are that he has to be sacrificed on an altar. I simply asked you, where is the cross described as an altar?
I didn't say cross as an altar.
No, stay with me. Stay
amazing
stay
how
with me.
you
And
twist the words.
And secondly, where in the Bible does it say sacrifices can only happen on an altar? What is an altar?
What I am asking you simply is this.
No, I asked you first.
No, no, you asked me first and I am answering.
Good.
A lamb when that is slaughtered as a sacrifice, or a goat, is it sacrificed on an altar or not? If it's not, then you don't have to have an altar. I am asking you, a perfect sacrificial lamb in the Old Testament times, is it sacrificed on an altar? If you can answer that question, that there is no altar needed, it is solved. You don't need an altar.
I asked you for
in the Old Testament times, in Exodus, in Leviticus, where this is described, do we need an altar for a sacrifice? If we don't, we don't.
I asked you for a biblical source.
I don't have a source.
Okay,
That's why I'm asking
thank
you.
So you don't have a source.
At the moment.
What do you mean at the moment? Find the source.
No, I'm not going to find the source. I'm going to ask you directly, because you know your Bible, don't you?
If you don't
So
know,
I am asking you, educate us.
If you don't know, just say you don't know.
Educate us.
Just say you don't know. I've said it again.
Do you know what
Jesus-
education means?
Stop, let me all to and fro.
Right.
Let me all to and fro.
Educate us. Do we need an altar or not,
If
according to
you-
the Old
if
Testament
you don't-
system?
If you don't know, then I'll tell you again. The Bible is absolutely clear that Jesus is the perfect sacrifice.
I didn't ask you that question.
No. but
When
you-
someone was sacrificed, when a lamb or a goat was sacrificed, were they sacrificed on an altar or not? If they are not, they don't have to be. I'm simply asking you to educate us. Do you know?
It's interesting.
Do you know?
It's interesting. Your first point is that he's not a perfect sacrifice.
Because he was injured.
Because he was injured.
That's my point.
Even though the Bible declares him to be the perfect sacrifice. So are you trying to say that?
Who claims? The Old Testament or the New Testament?
The New Testament has
No, the Old Testament says a perfect sacrifice is something that is not injured or maimed. So Jesus was injured, so he fulfills not that condition. He fails to fulfilling condition.
Exactly.
So,
my
according
first
to
point-
so
my first point
clarify
is
that,
this.
because he fails. Now correct me. Do we need for a perfect sacrifice in the Old Testament system an uninjured animal?
Yeah.
So you said yes. Jesus was injured, so he fails that. Moving to my next point.
No. Did you hear me when I said Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane said, "Not my will, but yours." He said he's going to be the sacrifice in that statement, and he was.
How does that address the first point of an
Can you
injury?
stop interrupting me? It's so rude. Before
Why do you think it's rude when I'm asking for a clarification?
Because you're interrupting.
No, I'm asking for a clarification.
Because you don't let
Is
me
it
finish
wrong
my
to ask
thought.
for a clarification?
You don't let
If
me
you're
finish
interrupting,
my
yes,
thought.
No, is it wrong for a clarification?
If you're interrupting, yes.
The way you are speaking, I'm glad you're looking at me in the face.
No,
now. That's nice of you.
do you see what clarification I'm asking for? I am saying, I asked you
Maybe
before.
if you allow me
No,
to finish my sentence, you'll
Go
get
ahead.
the answer.
Tell me when you're finished.
You'll hear
When
the
you're
answer.
finished, tell me I'm finished.
When
You
Jesus
can.
said, I'll say it again, I've said it several times. When Jesus said, "Not my will, but yours," he was saying that he's going to be the sacrifice. Was he injured at that point? No. So the issue is, when did the sacrifice start? Now Jesus, in the Bible it says that he was slain before the foundation of the earth. He has always been perfect. He came down perfect. He lived a perfect life. So he's always been the perfect sacrifice. If you want to argue this point, you're really going to have to find me a verse that says Jesus was not a perfect sacrifice. What you're doing is you're grasping at straws. You're not understanding what the Bible says, and you're trying to make contradictions where there's none.
Cheap words. When we talk about sacrifice, let's go back to the animal sacrificial system. When an animal is still on someone's house and they decide to sacrifice the animal, that animal is not sacrificed. According to your logic, the animal, because the decision is already made, is already sacrificed. But maybe at that point the animal was not injured. But subsequently, when the animal is taken to be slaughtered for sacrifice and is injured, is that a perfect sacrifice? The answer is no. That would not be considered a perfect sacrifice, because at the moment of sacrifice the animal was found to be injured and maimed. So it would not be classified as a perfect sacrifice. Jesus, in his transition, in your belief, from heaven to earth or to Garden of Gethsemane, this is a transition. At the moment he is being killed or crucified, that is the point he's giving his life away. At that point, was he injured? The answer is yes. So he is injured. He cannot be a perfect sacrifice.
This is such a terrible point to make.
It's not a terrible point. If you understand anything about logic, you would see that this makes sense.
It's such a terrible point. I mean, we can keep going over the same ground, but
go to the next point. Go to the next point.
If you refuse to admit that Jesus lived a perfect life, came down perfect, and said at the time he was about to be sacrificed that this is what he was willing to do, then this is logical. The logical difference in the Bible is that Jesus lived a perfect life, came down perfect, lived a perfect life, and then became a sacrifice. It's really simple. You don't have to complicate it.
Okay.
What's your second point?
Why? We'll go to the point, but just because you added this point.
So you want to have the last line?
No, not the last line. You can respond. A perfect sacrifice is a willing sacrifice, that he will to die. But you're now saying, oh, let this cup away from me. He was an unwilling sacrifice. An unwilling sacrifice is not a perfect sacrifice. So you can respond back and then respond to this, and you can go to the second point.
The very next things that he said was, but not my will, yours be done. He willingly did it.
No.
He didn't have to do it.
What was his will? To be sacrificed? Was his will to be saved or not to be saved?
Jesus himself says, I have come to give my life as a ransom for many. When Jesus says, you know what, I'm going to be killed. Wait, what did he say first? I'm going to be flogged. I'm going to be killed. On the third day I rise. And when Peter says, no, this is not of you, Jesus says, get behind thee, Satan. You don't have the things of God in mind. So Jesus was saying, this is the will of God. And remember, Jesus says that his will is the Father's will. Whatever the Father wants done is
you have given me a background explanation where Jesus initially, according to your belief, said he's going to lay down his life. But at the point when his life is to be taken away, he became what? He failed to fulfill this, because he said, let me finish, he said what? Let this cup be away from me, meaning what? He wanted to be saved. So his will was to be saved, but he somehow became humble and says, not according to my will, but according to your will. So basically he's submitting to will of his God. But what is his will? Is he willing to go to die and be a sacrifice? He's saying, no, let this cup be away from me. Did you hear what I said? Probably not. Let me repeat again. So at the point where he was about to now bring everything to an end by giving his life away, at this point he says, let this cup be away from me. The scholars explain, Christian scholars, meaning he wants death to be averted from him and to be saved. So even though he may have said it, I'm going to lay my life away, at the very moment when he's supposed to give his life away, he is saying, no, I don't want to die, but I know it's my will, I don't want to die, but I accept your will, which is I have to die, something. So a perfect sacrifice is someone who wills willingly to die, but he's saying, I want to be saved.
Where do you get that definition from?
Okay.
Perfect sacrifice wills willingly. No, and bear in mind, Jesus did will willingly.
Okay.
He willingly went and did it. He
But
said,
at the very moment...
Can I finish? He said, I could call down 1,000 angels, 1,000 legions of angels. But he didn't do it because he willingly went to the cross. But I want to know where in the Bible you get your definition that a cross willingly goes and does that.
Sure.
Where in the Old Testament do we find the lamb or the goats or the oxen that says, yes, take me to the slaughterhouse? I want to know where you get that from.
So someone who is very reluctant to be sacrificed is a perfect sacrifice, according to your understanding.
No, you were arguing, let me finish.
Hang on.
Before you were
No,
arguing,
I'm not arguing
that the
every
perfect
time with Old
sacrifice-
Testament
that
system.
the perfect sacrifice is something that's not lame, something that's not injured.
That's my two conditions.
No, so you were okay. So that's your conditions.
Two
And
conditions.
So at that point, are you also adding that? Are you also adding that the oxen or the bird or the cow
No, I'm
has
not.
to come along and say, I am willing to be
I am not adding that.
I'm willing
I
to
am
be
saying now, I am adding this point here. When you have a human being,
You're adding things to my Bible.
no, I'm adding to your understanding. Listen, if you say he's a perfect sacrifice, someone who says I'm going to sacrifice, how can you say someone is a perfectly willing sacrifice when he says I am reluctant to be sacrificed?
And then
And
what
you
does it say?
wait, let's understand this. Someone is very reluctant to die for you, and that is a perfect sacrifice according to you. Fair enough. If this is what you believe, that someone is very reluctant to die and that is a perfect sacrifice, I leave that up to you. Moving to my second point.
Even in the common sense definition of the word sacrifice, the everyday meaning of the word sacrifice, a sacrifice is something that is a sacrifice, something that you don't necessarily want to do, but you do it even though it's to your detriment. That's what the word sacrifice means.
Jesus was not wanting to doing it.
But he did it. That's the whole point.
No, but he was unwilling to do it.
That's why it's a sacrifice.
He was unwilling to do it.
When you do something that's a detriment to yourself, that's what a sacrifice is. So he sacrificed his body, he sacrificed his own well-being, he sacrificed everything for us so that we don't have to go to God, carry our own sin.
Okay.
So that we can go to God relying on his own righteousness. That's the whole
One
meaning of
problem
sacrifice.
with this, Jesus prayed to his God.
I remember it.
Did God answer his prayer?
So you've abandoned your other two.
No, I haven't abandoned. Jesus said, let be your will, not my will. His will was to be saved from the cross, to be saved from the death. Did God, his Father, his God, according to your belief, did his God accept his prayer and save him? Or did his prayer got rejected?
Jesus said, my will is to do the will of the Father. So Jesus' will...
No, his will was...
Don't say no, that's in the Bible.
No.
Are
In
you-
that very moment...
Are you denying? that
In
Jesus-
that very moment...
So you are accepting that Jesus said, my will is to do the will of the Father.
You're missing the point. In that very moment, it says, let that cup be away from me. That was his prayer.
I'm not
Did
missing the point.
your God, did the God of Jesus Christ accept that prayer and grant that prayer?
Right, I'm not missing the point, but what you want
So
to do
answer
is,
that, please.
What you want to do is cherry pick.
I'm not
Jesus-
cherry picking.
Good.
You raised it up and I've questioned it.
So can you stop interrupting me again, please? Yeah? Jesus very clearly said, my will is to do the will of the Father. In that moment, he said, not my will, but yours. Again, he was deferring, he was saying, I'm going to do the will of the Father.
And what was his will?
The will was that he become the sacrifice for all mankind,
No.
so that we don't have to go to God with our own sin, so that we can rely on
This
his
is not
righteousness.
correct.
So
His will...
so that we learn to put our faith and trust in the only
You are going
thing that
against
can
what the
save
text
us,
says.
the Savior Jesus Christ.
You're going against what the text says. The text says, let this cup be away from me, right? Did that text say that? Did Jesus say, let
Why
this...
are you saying that? And listen,
Wait, do not interrupt. Excuse me, do not interrupt. That's very rude. So, Jesus said, according to your scripture,
By the way.
let this cup be away from me. You're not even listening. That's even more rude.
it's,
That's rude, isn't
all
it?
right, one second.
That's not argument.
Checking with What do you want? Sorry, you want me to just checking with her father? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, go on.
What we're saying, let's understand the text. Does the text not say Jesus is praying to his God, remove this cup from me? Meaning, remove this imminent death that is awaiting from me. Save me from this death. That was his will. Is his will to be saved from death? And did God listen to his will?
Why are you ignoring the very next line? Why?
The very next line is, not according to my will, but according to your will.
So what
Right.
does that mean?
So that means if he was crucified, God did not answer his prayer. Because his prayer was to be saved. His prayer was to be saved. God's will is no, not to be saved.
Exactly.
Why would you bring it up in the first place? Why would Jesus say, take this cup from me? Why did he say that?
No, he's not talking about that.
That's the whole point. But he said, even though it's detrimental to me, I will do it.
say
Why
no.
bring it up? Why would you have to bring it up? We bring it up because it's like saying, please can you take this from me? He did ask him.
Why not?
He was praying.
So basically, God rejected his prayer.
Exactly.
What was the problem with it?
Because by bringing it up, it shows that he had a different will to the Father. That's what you're saying. Yeah?
Exactly. Two different wills.
What did Jesus say?
This is what he's saying.
What did Jesus say? Yet not my will, not yours.
Yeah, so basically,
what he's trying to do is-
so basically what he's, correct me if I'm wrong, sorry for interrupting. What he's saying is, Jesus' will was different from the Father. Jesus' will was different from the Father. I put it to him, but anyway, if you don't, then I'll have to do what you do. That's what he's saying basically.
You don't know.
No,
What
but
is
it's-
that? Okay, wait, brother. Let me break it down for you. Let me break it down for you.
My will is to do the will of the Father.
can show me-
Jesus said that's
you can
my
show
will.
me
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the Bible as a whole and not cherry picking half the sentence of what he said, then you can see that his entire purpose of come down on him is to do the will of the Father.
Sorry, yeah. So why would he bring it up then? Why would he say to the Father?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I'm asking you, why would he bring it up? Why bring up? Oh,
No, wait, is that in the Quran? Is that in the Quran?
why would he bring it up?
Did he will to be saved
Is that in the Quran?
at the time of crucifixion?
Why would he ask you? Why would he ask the Father?
Because before that, had the Lord's Supper when he knows one of you guys is going to
Get
betray
him a
me.
Quran and
He knew that very night that he was going to be taken. He was going to be brutalized. He was going to be whipped and bruised and mocked and all of that kind of stuff. He was going to be taken to the cross. These are things that I don't think anybody in their right mind would say, yay, let's do it.
When? Next year or next 10 years? When? Next
The
Sunday.
point
okay.
is still
Don't miss
valid.
next Sunday. Don't miss
He
next Sunday.
willed to be saved at that very moment. He may willed earlier on, I'm going to follow everything my father says. I will follow his will. But at this very moment, the crucial moment, he became one to beg his God to be saved, and his God did not answer his prayer. Instead, his God didn't listen to him.
It's a good point.
I'll tell you what.
It's a fair question.
Now move on to my second point and my third
I
point.
need to go, but I think it's a very, very...
Are you not going to answer the second and third
No, I
points?
need to go. But it's a very...
Why did you have to?
It's a very
Why?
big argument
Why?
to take half of a sentence
Why, Patrick?
and ignore the second half. But I need to go, I'm sorry.
Do you see?
I'm here every week.
Yeah, every week, but discussion doesn't happen every week. You have to go every week.
Don't come back. Now I brought up. I want to talk about it.
Logic according to the New Testament report at all. And I raised few points. One of the points I mentioned was the Old Testament system says a perfect sacrifice is something that is not injured. An animal is not injured or maimed or bruised. Jesus was actually injured and bruised during the transit while he was supposedly on the cross. Several other points. One of the points I made was this: if he was a sacrifice, meaning a substitute, then he should have taken our punishment on his shoulder. This is my third point I made. A punishment on his shoulder. If we were to reject the Christian concept of God, we would suffer in hellfire for eternity. Someone to be my volunteer willingly say, I will pay for your penalty. Meaning what? You will take the same punishment that I would have suffered, which is eternal burning in hellfire. So Jesus must, for even one person who rejects God, to save him, has to suffer in hellfire for eternity, to be a substitute. But he didn't suffer eternal hellfire. So he could not be a substitute for even one person, let alone the whole Christendom or everywhere else. So, for 5 points I've made, every single point you can see how it failed. Jesus failed to be a sacrifice in all the way that we described. But obviously, it is not very fair on me to say that all of them fail. We discussed only one of them and touched on the second one. So, as we have realized now, she keeps on bringing what? Oh, Jesus, on the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed. You need to be sacrificed. When you're dead, then that's a sacrifice. When an animal is kept at home, the animal is not sacrificed. So we are talking about the point of sacrifice. According to the belief, he was injured, he was maimed, he was bruised. So that's what we were discussing in the first point. So he could not be, according to the Old Testament system of sacrifice, a perfect sacrifice. That's the clarification that I could make. But anyway, what we need to understand is this: according to Muslims, we don't believe none of these happened. These are stories and rumors that has been spread. We believe Isa alayhi salam, or Jesus, the son of Mary, was a mighty messenger of God who came to invite people to worship God alone. That is why the remnants are very clear that he is saying, your will, not according to my will, according to your will. Clearly showing his servitude and subservience to someone up there in heaven who is God, his God. So we believe he was a sincere worshipper of God, asking people to worship God alone. And this is the message of Islam. And that's the talk for another time.
Inshallah. Jazak Allah Khair.